There is one quarterback we have not talked about very much since, honestly, they've not been the starter anymore, and that is Dillon Gabriel. He has fallen out of the conversation for starting quarterback. He's not really part of what people are calculating. Anytime I feel like I include him in a conversation, I feel like I'm just being nice, right? When it comes to Dillon Gabriel. And I think of all the quarterbacks in that room, right? The chips have not fallen in a worse way for Dillon Gabriel than they could have for any of the other quarterbacks, right? At least with Todd Monken being hired, you can see how Shador might be successful in that kind of an offense because it does fit more of what his skill set is. Not a perfect fit, but certainly more of a fit than it is for Dillon Gabriel. Even with Deshaun Watson, and there's a lot to talk about with Deshaun and why. Like, I think it's very reasonable and very, very, very understandable for most people, which I think is the case, to not have a single shred of hope left for Deshaun Watson. But, like, if you look at what Deshaun Watson used to be good at a long time ago, Todd Monken does do some of the stuff that Deshaun used to be good at. Can Deshaun do any of the things he used to be able to do? Probably not, but it's still there. Then you look at this offense, you look at the history of Todd Monken coming from a spread, then an air raid, then kind of switching up to what he ran in Baltimore and what he ran in Georgia. And you look at what Dillon Gabriel can do, and you try to find parallels for him, right? You're like looking around and you're trying to find people who line up skill set wise with Dillon, and then you only end up with Stetson Bennett because Stetson Bennett's small. But even with Stetson Bennett was a better athlete than Dillon Gabriel, which really made the difference at Georgia, right? Like, that was the big thing on why he played. So you just end up looking at Dillon Gabriel and thinking to yourself, what in the world is the plan here with him? Because he's a third-round pick from last year. He wasn't like a day 3 pick or something. He was a day 2 pick last year. And he was drafted with a specific vision in mind. Just to remind people, like, Kevin wanted Dillon Gabriel. Obviously, Andrew obliged and took him in the top 100. And that dynamic was created because there was a specific vision for Dillon Gabriel, right? There was this idea from Kevin and the offensive staff that Dillon Gabriel could be what Tua was in 2021 or what Brock Purdy is now, right? Yeah, a little undersized, but plays really tough, has a lot of moxie, throws it over the middle still despite his height, and surprising zip on his arm despite being very, very small. That was the hope, right? That, hey, they thought his arm was stronger than most people thought it was coming out of camp. I'm not coming out of camp, but coming out the draft. And that they felt like, hey, this is somebody who is talented enough. He's just short. And they felt like there were these multiple paths for success for Dillon Gabriel. And then Dillon Gabriel got to Cleveland. He got put in that offense. And during camp, I thought he was fine. I thought he had some moments where it's like, okay, you can see him operate offense. I thought during the preseason, he was pretty good. And then the regular season started. He got some reps in game, and I thought he got progressively worse as the season went on. And I think where it's concerning that he got worse is that he became less willing to throw over the middle, less willing to step up in pockets, right? He became more timid. And one of the things you're kind of betting on with Dillon Gabriel being the height that he is that he's not going to be timid. And if he is timid, then that's too much to overcome when he has already a ton to overcome. So you end up in this awkward situation with Dillon Gabriel where he's a third round pick, but of all the people on the roster, this is the guy who benefits the least from all the moves happening to the offense. Like nobody on the roster, on paper at least, right? Maybe Dillon Gabriel is actually a perfect fit for this offense, and we find that out. I highly doubt it, but the possibility is there, right? As small as it is. But more than likely, he is probably the guy who benefits the least from all the changes on offense. And this happens, right? This is part of the danger of switching coaches, which is you are going to have guys who were drafted for a specific reason that lose their way when you're constantly changing coordinators, when you're constantly changing position coaches, when you're constantly changing offensive coordinators or head coaches, right? Like when you're constantly changing these things, you're going to have draft picks that don't develop because the plan for them when they were selected gets thrown out the window, and then now they're kind of in this purgatory, right? I bring up all the time if the track record difference between what the defense is able to do with day 3 and undrafted free agents and what the offense has been able to do with day 3 and undrafted free agents. And I think Dillon Gabriel and to a lesser extent Zach Zinter are perfect examples of the difference there, right? The defense has continuity. The defense has stability. The defense can take on a project like Devin Bush for 2 years and then turn out a Pro Bowl caliber player after a couple of years because they have the consistency and the ability to use that consistency to create an environment for players to develop. On the offensive side of the ball, there's been a lot of turnover. Even before Kevin got fired, there has been a lot of turnover. We're talking about 3 years, 3 offensive coordinators, 3 years, 3 offensive line coaches. I think there's no bigger victim of that than Zach Zinter, right, who was brought in under Andy Dickerson with the idea that the Browns were going to do what Andy Dickerson wanted to do. And then Andy Dickerson gets fired in the middle of the season, right? Remember that Zach Zinter, his rookie year, had that great preseason everybody was talking about because he was doing what he was drafted to do, right, which is what Andy Dickerson wanted to do. For whatever reason, there was a small revolt in that offensive line room that got Andy Dickerson out of there. And then after that, it felt like Zach Zinter, he felt a little lost in his development. Like, I think there's a direct line that you could draw there. And that's because once Andy Dickerson went out of there, you brought in somebody to bring back the old way in the offensive line room. And that's not what Zach Zinter was brought in to do. So now he's a mismatch piece trying to develop in an offensive line room that don't want him no more. And then you get to this year, again, the Browns trying to do the same old thing. It just doesn't work out. He barely gets to play. And now you're sitting on the 3rd round pick that you probably wasted because you didn't have a plan that was able to pan out more than like 3 months before you had to fire an offensive line coach. Guys get drafted for a reason on offense and defense to do specific roles. And if you're constantly changing the coaches assigning those roles, you're not going to develop them. And Dillon Gabriel, I think, is another example of this. Was brought in to be the Kevin Stefanski guy, was brought in to run the Kevin Stefanski offense, was brought in some ways to be, Colt McCoy or, Case Keenum. And now he's in a Todd Monken offense. And I've heard Todd Monken describe what he wants at the quarterback position. I don't think it's ever been Dillon Gabriel. And correct me if I'm wrong. Has he ever said the name Dillon Gabriel? Like, honestly, has he? Which brings me to why I think Dillon Gabriel's got to be the odd man out here, right? The Browns have Deshaun Watson, who they are obligated to see if he can throw the football at a proficient level again. Then they have Shedeur Sanders, who, of the young guys, he fits what Todd Monken wants to do the most, right? So Shedeur's probably not going anywhere. I'd be very surprised if they're able to move Deshaun Watson, right? Like, I don't think he's going anywhere either, right? you're probably going to want to bring in one more name to enter into that quarterback competition or to be more intriguing. Because the reality is that Deshaun Watson should not really be a major factor here. I don't anticipate Deshaun Watson being intriguing as a quarterback. And I don't think the Browns can sit here after the litany of injuries that he's had and the colossal amounts of missed time that he's had in the last 5 years and seriously think that his ambitions for this year should be anything more than maybe be the backup, right? Like, the idea that he's just going to start is kind of crazy when you think about everything his body has been through, everything his mind has went through, everything going on with Deshaun Watson. It doesn't seem like a recipe for a starting quarterback anytime soon, if we're being completely sober and honest about it. So you're probably going to want to bring in one more name, but you can't get rid of Deshaun. He has to be on the roster. He's going to be at least an emergency third quarterback. The competition cannot be Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, right? It could be Shedeur Sanders and somebody else, but it can't be Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So it has to be somebody else, right? So you're probably going to want to bring in somebody. Maybe it's Anthony Richardson. Maybe it's Tyler Huntley. But it's going to be somebody, right, who fits the offense more than Dillon Gabriel, which leaves Dillon Gabriel in this no man's land. And it's why I've made so many jokes about Kevin Stefanski coming up and trading for him, because honest to God, that would probably be the best thing for Dillon Gabriel's career if he got traded for Cleveland, because I just don't see how him being in Cleveland is going to be successful for his career at this point, right? Like, it's not a fit. You don't seem wanted. The head coach doesn't seem to know you exist. Like, Andrew Berry had to, like, bring you up just so people remembered that you're on the team. And I think he's doing that for trade purposes. And then you look at the body of work that he put out there. I don't know who's willing to really trade for that. So it's a tough situation for Dillon Gabriel. And I think if you're looking for somebody who's gotten the short stick, no pun intended there, I think it's definitely Dillon Gabriel. I think he's gotten the roughest deal out of every quarterback in that room, because people are talking about giving Deshaun another shot, even though, you know, we got to be realistic about what people's expectations should even remotely be about that. You know, Shedeur obviously going to be encouraged to get a shot here, right? He's a rookie quarterback. Well, he's a second-year quarterback. Had some nice throws last year. People are going to encourage that. But Dillon, nobody's rooting for it. Every time he steps out there, he gets booed. We didn't even touch on that whole aspect of it. Like, really, in anybody's heart of hearts, even if you're a Dillon Gabriel fan, do you feel like there's really a chance for success for him in Cleveland here at this point? I don't think that's the case. So if you're the Browns, if you're Dillon Gabriel, you probably want to get out of here, right? So yeah, you know, I would be surprised if Dillon ends up on the roster by in September. I would be surprised. I think he ends up being moved or possibly even cut, but cap-wise, it doesn't make sense to cut him, so probably trade it. You know, and the Browns have found a way to pair picks with players to get them traded before, so I don't think the trade value thing's going to be that much of a hindrance for it. So that's my thoughts. I think Dillon is clearly the odd man out here. I think the Browns are still going to want to bring in somebody external into this quarterback competition, and I don't think they have any interest in seeing Dillon Gabriel in this offense for longer than maybe training camp. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.